So my name's Alden Heller. I am 26. I drive two cars. I drive this 1986 Ford Mustang GT, and I just recently bought a 1960 Studebaker Lark. My love of cars started from a very early age. I would just play with Hot Wheels and Matchbox cars when I was like super little, playing out in the dirt. Probably my first word was car. My dad was kind of into cars, like just kind of lightly into cars. He had a Toyota pickup truck, like an '89 Toyota pickup truck when I was growing up, which was really cool. And it was like the first time I ever shifted gears in a truck, in a vehicle. He also had a 1965 Chevy Impala SS. It was a baby blue color with black vinyl interior, and it was really sweet. It had some issues, but it was kind of my dad's midlife crisis kind of car. My dad had a few other cars when he was growing up, not in my, when I was alive, but his first car was a '67 Mustang, and he also had a '66 Chevy El Camino, and all those cars were, kind of like his babies. He had a '89 Chevrolet Camaro. But other than that, he wasn't really into working on them and tinkering on them. It was just basically owning them and owning the cool car. So I kind of got into it through him, but with myself. And I have an uncle who used to be a mechanic, and he worked on cars. I was around the hobby, just not fully engulfed in it. I kind of got myself into it. I guess that makes sense. But definitely inspiration from family and friends. I took automotive service in high school, and I went to tech, and we worked on my parents' cars, like family's cars, friends' cars. Cars to me are a blank canvas where you get something like this, or just even your own Econobox, or a Miata, or a muscle car, or anything, a truck, and you can customize it to a way it fits your personality. You can use this and paint it a different color, lower it, put different wheels on it, put a different interior on it, change out the engine, change the exhaust, change things in the engine, change a whole bunch of different aspects of this car. Or even if you're buying a brand new car and you customize it, it could look completely different than someone else's car that they just bought off the showroom floor. You put your personality and your love, your time and effort and everything into these cars, and usually it keeps you out of trouble, it keeps you out of drugs, it keeps you out of doing things that you're not supposed to do. Instead, you drive cars. You surround yourself with cars. Cars are very therapeutic. They're very, it's a cathartic experience when you're driving on, back roads and the woods, and you see the leaves change in the fall, or if your window's down in the spring, you smell the flowers. You drive on these curvy roads, and you don't need to think about all the stresses of your life. You just drive around and you have fun. You don't think about anything else. And so it's an experience that you really can't get anywhere else, especially with you in control. You can go to an amusement park, you can get on a roller coaster, you can go through a haunted house or whatever, but you're not in control. You can go on an airplane, you're not in control. This is where you have control. You can drive however fast you want. You can go around twisty roads. You can have fun in these cars, and that's what it's about for me. Like I said before, I used to go to automotive trade school in high school, and that's really where the hobby kind of, it notched up to 11, I'd say, where I was surrounding myself with other like-minded people, and I went to school with them, and it was just where these people had the equipment, had the tools, had lifts, had all this expensive equipment to work on these things, and so people brought in their own cars and showed me, hey, I can actually own a really cool car. And I started watching a lot of YouTube channels with the automotive hobby, and I really dove headfirst into the hobby around high school. I didn't have a cool car at the time. I didn't have a car like this for a while, but I still got into the hobby. I still was obsessed with, trying to get my license and trying to do everything I could to get into the hobby. I kind of felt left out with my friends who had their licenses and I didn't. And, it made me a little anxious with a lot of stuff, but eventually I got my license and I got a cool car. Once I got my license, I kind of dove again head first into it. I kind of lost interest in my senior year of high school. I kind of went on a different path. I didn't really want to be in the automotive industry anymore, at least as a career. But after high school, it kind of formed more into an actual, hobby rather than like a career. And that's when I got my first car. My first car was a 1986 SVO. And that was basically this, except it's a turbocharged 4-cylinder car. It's kind of a rare car, kind of a very unique niche car with a cult following around it. And that car kind of sparked my interest in not only automotive, like performance cars, but also older cars as well. And it had a lot of issues and a lot of electrical problems, and too much for my bank account. So eventually, I did sell it. I kind of regret selling it, but at the same time, it was not worth it at the time to keep it around. But having something to work on, like an older car that you can put money and time into, is something that it might be really tiring and annoying when your car breaks, but at the same time, you gain a learning experience and you learn from working on it. And that's exactly what happens with all of my cars. Every consecutive car that I've owned since. And I'm continuing to learn. Learning stick is something that I think everyone should learn. I feel like everyone who knows how to drive stick says that. It is unfortunately a dying breed. It is, I think, 3% of all cars nowadays are stick shift, as opposed to 30, 40 years ago where it was a decent percentage of all new cars. There's only, a couple handfuls left of brand new cars that are even optioned with a manual transmission. I still think that it is something that you should learn. It's a fun way of driving. There's all the stereotypical things that you could say where you feel more in control, it's more fun, you get better performance, all that stuff. It's all a stereotype. But when it really comes down to it, you're in control, you're driving, and it's how you like to drive. If you want to feel like you have more of an input in the car, then drive a manual transmission. I learned on my first car, SVO, that was a manual only vehicle. They only came in a manual transmission. And the car, my dad tried to help me learn how to drive stick, but there's only so much you can do from watching someone drive stick to actually learn. I'm a big believer of throwing yourself into it and just learning and just doing it, kind of just like sink or swim. And so what I ended up doing was, after my SVO, I bought an automatic transmission Mustang, another one of these, and after I sold that, I got a 1996 Honda Accord for $1,000 as my winter beater car. Just a car that I could drive and not care about in the winter. And that was a 5-speed. And I had, a basic grasp of how to drive stick, but I didn't fully know how to drive it. And so once I went from the tag place and I bought it, I drove straight from the tag place to the King of Prussia Mall with, I just said, I'm just gonna go. And I did. And I think I stalled once, but I just kept at it, kept driving it, kept going, just threw myself into it all the time. It was my only car, and so I had to drive stick if I was gonna drive. And so eventually I learned, after, a few stallings at intersections and stalling on hills and getting, anxious and nervous about the people behind me from rolling back, I eventually mastered it. Well, not mastered, but I eventually knew what I was doing. And I'm a big believer, and that's how you got to do it. You can't just watch someone and watch YouTube tutorials, watching someone learn how to drive a stick, or showing you how to drive a stick, showing you their foot movements or the way they're positioning their hand on the wheel and all that. It's not going to make a difference to you. You have to do it in order to fully learn. So I picked this car, the 1986 Mustang GT, because it is a car that has a huge, almost unmatched aftermarket community, and just a giant following with these cars of people that care about them. That's just one of the reasons. Another reason is the Fox body, which is the platform that this Mustang is on, ran from 1979 to 1993. And the Fox body platform has a plethora of other cars. It's not just Mustangs. There was Thunderbirds, Ford Fairmonts, Lincoln Mark 7s. There's a whole plethora of cars that platform is on that all share parts. And so not only is there a gigantic aftermarket community, but there is a huge amount of aftermarket or regular parts that are available from these cars and in regular part stores. So if something breaks on this car and it shares, a part with another car, you can easily get it. It's not something that's going to be super rare and hard to find, and you'll be waiting weeks to get, especially with an old car. I knew that I wanted an old car. I just didn't know exactly what. And when I did pick these cars, these Fox body Mustangs, I knew that those cars had a huge aftermarket, and that I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't be waiting a very long time trying to source parts of something that might, be a simple fix on other cars. And so that's one of the main reasons. Another reason is that I knew I wanted a performance car, and these cars, for their value, you can't beat it. You get a 5-speed manual transmission with a 5-liter V8 pushing out 225 horsepower from the factory. Rear-wheel drive configuration. If you want a classic muscle car sound for a cheaper price than the 60s and 70s muscle cars, this is the car. These cars are completely unmatched with anything else that I've ever driven. They give you hell sometimes. They give you problems. They'll break down occasionally. It's never anything catastrophic. These engines are near bulletproof. But these cars are just awesome. I've owned this one for coming up on 3 years next week. So this car, in comparison to a, let's say, 2022 Mustang GT, is in every respect different. This car is completely different. They share some similarities, but a newer Mustang makes way more power, way more torque. It has independent rear suspension. This car is a live axle. In every respect, a 2022 Mustang GT is going to be better than this car right here. But I would pick this car over a 2022 Mustang GT any day, because for me, it's about the car itself and the way and how you drive it. It's not about all the luxury features, all the things that you get with one of those cars. It is about the experience. I want to drive this car. I want to continue driving these cars. New cars put you in a bubble, and it's something that I like to feel in control. And as the electric age continues and continues, we're getting less and less in control of our own cars. In the years to come, we will probably see self-driving cars where you just get in without a steering wheel and just go. You punch in a location on a GPS and then you go. And I'm going to be honest, I don't like that. I like being in control of my automobile. I like being in control to go wherever I want and drive. It is therapeutic for me. And the idea of losing that ability in the future scares me. So I will continue driving these cars as long as I possibly can. Anything older, anything like these, I will continue driving these cars. This car has a wide variety of modifications. Some were done before me by the previous owners. Some were done by me. I'm going for a late 80s, 90s build for this car. My car does have a name. It is Lightning, and it's not named after Cars, the movie, Lightning McQueen. It is named pretty much based on when I saw it and I saw the color. It reminded me a lot of Metallica's second album, Ride the Lightning, just based on the color. And the name kind of stuck with me. I've previously named a lot of my cars kind of angry names. My first car's name was Fury, and my second car's name was Lucy, after Lucifer. And so this car with the name Lightning and with Metallica's second album, it just kind of fit, and it's kind of grown on me. I've really liked the name Lightning, and it's also the fastest car I've ever owned, so it is lightning quick in my book. I'm basically going to be putting this car back into the late 80s, early 90s with the modifications that it has, and putting things on that were semi-stock, but with modifications that make it look like a car that would be competing in the late 80s, early 90s. As cheesy as it sounds, if I could only own one car in the world, it would be this car. I feel that a Mustang GT, specifically a Fox body Mustang, is the perfect all-around car. These cars, like I said before, have a gigantic aftermarket. It's unmatched, completely unmatched in anything in the industry. And the parts are cheap. You can find them everywhere. It doesn't take weeks and months to get parts. The hatchback configuration makes loading groceries or parts or whatever you need to haul super easy. It makes it so convenient. It has 4 seats, which can fit 4 people. Not comfortably, but you can fit 4 people if you need to fit 4 people. It is 5-speed, rear-wheel drive, has a V8, makes decent power. Power-to-weight ratio is very good for this car specifically. It's just a good all-around car. I get 15 miles per gallon average, which is not great, but in comparison to new cars, obviously it's not going to be anything near new cars. But for how old it is, for the amount of power it makes, for the fact that it's a V8, I feel very comfortable with that number. I've gotten as high as 20 miles per gallon on the highway, which is higher than some of the cars that I've had 4 cylinders. These cars just speak to me. It's not about the value, it's not about how many people like the car. It's about the car itself and the experience. A Ferrari or a Lamborghini or a McLaren or a Corvette or an Audi, anything, you can name anything. It doesn't speak to me, especially new ones, in the way that this car does. This car has character. This car has style. It has complete persona. And I feel that it is matched with my own, and I feel a part of this car. And it sounds super cheesy, but that's how I feel about this car. I would own this car over any other car. I would love to keep this car for as long as humanly possible.